Well, thanks for coming, Derek.
Yeah,
This
thanks for
is
having me.
great to have someone that I was just looking at your last map that was like almost 2 years ago, right at 2 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
So 2 years later, and we haven't done any training since, right?
that's right.
Just normal life.
Yep,
So why don't you give people your kind of story, kind of what you came in for a little over 2 years ago?
sure. If I may, it started probably when I was about 14 years old. There was the 1994 Northridge earthquake.
Remember it?
Turns out I was in the epicenter of that, and I was with some buddies, very far away from where my parents and brother were, and it was a horrible experience.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, if this is what I'm dealing with, I can only imagine that they're dead.
Right.
So it was pretty traumatic. Luckily, everyone was fine. But about 6 months afterwards, I started getting panic attacks. And I remember the first time I ever got one. I mentioned it to my parents. My mom said, "Oh yeah, I get those. Your grandmother used to get those." So there was maybe a propensity within the family to maybe get them.
Right.
And then throughout high school, I just kind of dealt with it. Didn't do anything about it. Didn't know how to do anything about it. Anxiety was not anything that was really discussed or talked about. We certainly didn't have the sort of conversations back then that we're having now about anxiety and mental health. And so for most of my life, I was off and on different medications. Some medications had side effects I really didn't like. For most of my life, I really just was either taking sedatives, kind of like a Xanax, or self-medicating through alcohol. So I was able to do things like fly in a plane or go into a theater, things like that, because by that point the anxiety, the panic attacks had grown to agoraphobia. So I didn't like flying, I didn't like big open spaces, concerts, theaters and stuff, but I could do those things so long as I was totally bombed, you know. My law school graduation was 4 whiskeys and 2 Xanaxes at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
That was how I was able to deal with being in an open auditorium. I just didn't feel safe and comfortable. And then I had an opportunity kind of later on in my life where it was just becoming untenable. I remember a local journalist here in Los Angeles, who's also a lawyer, had reached out to me. We had worked on something really briefly, but he said, Derek, I really like working with you. You're great. I'd love to take you out for a Laker game. Got front row seats to the Laker game. I'd love for you to come. It would be great. We can kind of work together, do business. It was a tremendous opportunity. And the afternoon of that game, I got sick. I was unable to show up because I knew I would have a panic attack. And I knew that alcohol and Xanax were not going to be able to work for me because it was a business meeting. Didn't want to come bomb to a business meeting. Didn't want to drive home after that either. So it got to a point where the anxiety was now controlling my life, and I was really missing out on a lot of opportunities. And that became more and more apparent. My world became smaller and smaller. Again, I could still do, I wasn't homebound, but I was very limited in what kind of adventures and things I would like to do. And then just kind of resigned to the fact that this was going to be my life, Brian. That was it. Didn't really know what else to do until my best friend had informed me about you guys. And I said, well, it almost seems too good to be true, but why not? I've tried prescription drugs, I've tried meditation, I tried psychedelics, I tried other drugs and alcohol, and why not give this a try? I was skeptical because it seemed to be too good to be true, but I came in and we started our journey together. And so that's where we got to where we were about 2 years ago.
That's what a story, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's that really debilitates you, huh? I mean, from someone with a law degree that should have everything in life going well, the mental side can just take it all away from you, right?
Yeah, and to that point, it was particularly troubling because I'd grown up in a wonderful family. I had never been in a war zone before. I'd never experienced trauma, abuse, nothing like that. So not only was I dealing with the panic and the agoraphobia and the anxiety, but to your point, compounding it with the guilt of why am I having these problems? Why? It wasn't so much as why me, but I felt guilty for having them because there's so many other people that were in the world that were suffering, who didn't have the opportunities and the love and care and family that I had. yet I was living a very limited life.
Yeah, yeah. And it's hard for other people probably to kind of, have a little bit of compassion and stuff for you. Like, come on, Derek,
Right.
your life was perfect. You got everything done here. What's wrong? You can't go
Yeah.
to a Laker game. You can't go for a hike. You can't go for these things. Like, because they don't understand it.
That's right, and it was difficult, particularly as a man, to explain that to girlfriends, to have that vulnerability to say like, hey, this is something I've been dealing with for a long time. When you have a phobia for like a bodily sensation of rapid heartbeat, your hands sweating, which when I was younger I used to interpret as feelings of joy and excitement. Now all of a sudden my mind turned against my body. And it was very difficult to explain to people. How do you explain to people that you have a phobia or a fear of something that is really, it's just so much in your head. There's no objective thing that you can point to.
Right.
And yeah, it definitely impacted my relationships because I had to lie to so many friends and family about, what I was able to do. And as I mentioned before, that interaction I had with that lawyer who's a famous journalist, I had to get sick because I couldn't say to him, sorry, I have anxiety and panic disorder. I'm not going to show up to the Laker game front row seats. So it was very, very troubling.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that story because so many people deal with that. And, mental health is about the only medical specialty that we treat everything off symptoms. Mm-hmm. So if you have these symptoms, okay, here's what we need to do. Take medication. You need to desensitize to it. Just push through, right? Just go to the Laker game, push through, do all these things. Right. Which, when there's physiology in the brain that is causing the symptoms, you can't do it, just like you wouldn't be able to lift something heavy if you had a broken arm, right? And when you have a broken arm, everybody can see it, so everybody's like, well, don't lift it. Here, I'll lift it for you.
Sure.
But when you can't see it, it's like, well, why can't you lift it? Watch, this is how easy it is to lift with my arm. You should be able to lift with yours. And we don't look at the same as with mental health because of that.
Without a doubt. I mean, there, perhaps it's something even cultural. We think of like, the American dream. You pick yourself up by the bootstraps and you go and you fight to live another day. And there's sort of that that courage that you have to face your challenges. But when you physically cannot,
right.
And if I think about my brain as kind of a broken organ, how do you explain it? So again, it's not physical. If you see me in a sling, okay, of course you're not going to play football. But when you can't show someone what your brain looks like, and then you can't do the things that you want, it's really difficult to explain to people. And culturally, we just don't have, I think, kind of the right tools to approach them.
Until now.
Until now, yes, of course, yes.
And this is where I love, the advances that neuroscience has made, neuroimaging of the brain, where now we can look at the brain like we look at everything else, right? And for you, I mean, this top map up here was your first map. This red we should never see. These red areas are 99.9% too high. Okay.
I'm surprised you let me in the building with that.
Exactly. Well, all the lights went on when your brain came on. There's a little nuclear power plant there. But this red here shows electricity firing away in your brain. Think of the red very much like a muscle that's always flexed, right? Or a heart rate, right? A heart rate, this red would be the equivalent of having a resting heart rate of 130 beats per minute, and you wonder why you hate running. If you start out at 130 and then you stress your heart on top of that, it's going to feel horrible. And people would never say, if you had a resting state at 130, they'd never say, come on, run, just push yourself. Like, no, you don't push yourself. You're too high already, to have some reserve. And yet with the brain, same type of thing. So when these, are up here, and we don't have really time to go into all the details about, all these different types of neurons that are in the brain and how they're firing, but it's just such an overactive brain that you were always just, every single person will panic when you hit this level, right? And you were starting out the day right here. Right. Most people start out the day down here. We've got plenty of reserve, plenty of room. Again, it'd be like starting out at 130 beat heart rate and you don't want to do anything. If you get up, it starts to feel like you're going to have a panic attack, or in that case, a heart attack, but in this case, a panic attack. So, and this is where we've got to image the brain, see where someone is. And then when we do specific things through nutritional protocols, through neurofeedback, which is like physical therapy for the brain, where we can train that down. This first one was on 12/5, so December 5th, 2022. And this next map here, we do a mid map in between two, but this was your final map, was on 3/1. So we're talking less than 3 months. Less than 3 months, you went from here to here.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of tell me how your life has changed now with this type of brain activity here.
It was almost immediate. My girlfriend is an avid hiker, and we could, on weekends, we would try hiking. Again, the panic, the not having a sense of control. I could get to certain corners or certain trails, and then we'd have to stop and pause, and I'd have to breathe, and other people would be walking by. What's going on? Why are you stopping in the middle of the trail? But thankfully, she was patient enough with me to do that. After we were done, I remember we went on a hike that weekend, and I strolled through those panic zones, if you would. Those same corners, those same kind of cliffs, those same paths. I mean, it was a totally different experience. I mean, we couldn't believe it, that I was able to complete some of these trails that a week or two prior were debilitating. I could not move. And now I'm just blowing through these places. And to me, that was just, that alone was worth all the time and effort of doing this, because it just increased my life. Finally, we could do a hobby together, and we started taking up hiking more because finally she had a partner who was willing to do these things. So very quickly, things turned around. I definitely do not live with the fear and the panic that I used to. Is it going to be the end all be all cure all of everything? Of course not. You have to your point, you mentioned nutritional needs. I know if I eat pizza and drink beer on a Friday night, I'm going to feel like hell the next morning. You're going to feel awful, Right. And even if take out the alcohol, even if I just eat junk food, which I don't, but if I were to, you have to take care of your brain.
Right.
The best way to do that is through nutrition.
I love how you talk about that part of it with the nutrition side, because when your brain is firing away with this much electricity and you have this much room, when you feel like eating something, first of all, you go right here, and at this point, you need energy instantly. You could care less about the long-term effects. You could care less about, how you're going to feel tomorrow.
Right.
Like when you need alcohol to put me out of my misery right now, I need it now. I don't care about how I'm going to feel tomorrow. When I need sugar or something right now, it gives me instant energy right now. I don't care about the crash that's going to come later or anything. You're just in this instantaneous gratification. I need this now.
Right.
Where when you're down here, you don't need it, you want it, and you can make good decisions. You can let's see, if I have that now, I'm going to pay the price later, right? And so to be able to have better ability to even make decisions is huge.
Yeah, when you're living in this world, everything is a short-term kind of game.
Right.
You're just trying to bring yourself back down to here. And some of those things, particularly alcohol, can bring you down for a second.
Yeah.
But boy, it hits you back on the back end, and you get even worse than you were before.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's about thinking long term about your brain health, your nutritional health. I mean, all of it is kind of holistic, but it's really hard to get holistic and to explain to someone that your brain is just like any other organ in your body when you're up here. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't register because you're constantly in that fight or flight mode, that you don't have time to register to start long planning any kind of part of your life.
Exactly.
You just can't.
Right.
So you get down here, it's like, okay, now we can start picking up the habits and the positive things that are going to continue to reinforce the healthy life that all of us deserve to live, and more that we deserve to have. That it's easy, so uninvasive that I don't know why someone wouldn't try it.
Right. And without medication, without some invasive brain surgery, literally just training your brain down like physical therapy would for the body.
Well, what's the point of medication if once you're on it, you're just going to go back to having a red brain?
Exactly.
Why? And then to spend my life, what I've learned after this is that to fully experience life, you need all of your emotions. It doesn't mean you're never going to be anxious again or depressed again. Of course, that's part of life. Doesn't necessarily need to be up here, but if a medication is dulling your senses to where, okay, I'm not going to experience anxiety or depression, but what else am I sacrificing? Joy, happiness, other things in my life that I could experience, the highs and lows that life is really all about at times. If you're dulling one part of your brain, you can't expect that it's not going to dull other parts of your brain. And so I wanted to live a complete life, and I found that doing neurofeedback was empowering me to do that, versus drugs that would just kind of dope me up in a way that I would miss out on certain other things that I didn't want to do that anymore. And it wasn't very effective, frankly, either.